Hey guys, today we're going to make one of these DNA75 mods in a 1590A enclosure, except not so pink. So first thing we'll do is get rid of the lean on the enclosure. Mentioned in my other videos how because these are they're cast in a mold, and to be able to slide out of the mold properly, there's a bit of an angle, you could probably see here, that's a bit of a lean, so they pop out of the mold easier. And a lot of people don't bother with this step. You can leave the lean. It's not very drastic, but we're going to remove it. And we'll do that on the bench sander. I'm just going to put the screws in here. And we'll meet you over at the bench sander. I've got an 80 grit belt on here, and we're just gonna lay the enclosure against the gate here, make sure we have a 90 degree, and we'll go all the way around. You can see how it starts to wear. Keep an even pressure to get an even wear, and we'll go 3/4 of the way to the end, because the 80 grit leaves a lot of belt marks here, so we'll switch to a 120 grit belt after to finish to the edge. Then we'll hand sand with some even smaller grits. So we'll repeat this all the way around, try and get rid of as much of that lean as possible. Swap the belt for the 120 and hit it again to get rid of all the belt marks on here. Now we'll glue on the drill templates. You can download these off the website. Hard to tell because my printer's black and white, but on the website these lines here for the lid are cyan, and the first one I made, I cut along this line to line up with the lid line, but I mostly vape in my left hand like this, and I kind of want I wish the lid would be over on this side. So this time around I'm going to mount all of this on the other side of the case, so I'm going to use this lid line here. For the top and bottom you can go a few millimeters inside of the lines, doesn't matter. So then along this lid line here, And these lines line up with the screw posts inside of the case. We'll see that in a second. So that'll go on like this, and we want to line up the lines for the screw posts here with the inside of the screw posts, like that. I'm going to use a glue stick. Then the top. I'm going to wrap the whole thing in a clear tape. Now before we drill into this, we're going to use a center punch to make a little divot in the center of all these holes here to help guide the drill bit. And we need to be very precise, especially the screw holes that'll mount the board. My punch is kind of big, so I will use it, but I'll make a first smaller divot using this little finishing nail here. I'll reattach the lid before I do this. So right the crosshair of all these holes. Now I'll do it again with the actual punch. That first little divot will help me center the punch here. And that'll help guide the drill bit so it doesn't wander, so we get our holes right in the center there. I'm going to start with the smallest drill bit I have, which is 1/16, just to make a pilot hole on all those divots where we did the center punch. looking good. Get that 510 connector hole done. Now the rest of the machining on here, I'm going to pull out the Dremel and we'll cut our straight lines in the screen. The screen and the USB stay inside the lines, and we'll fine tune it with a hand file after. That'll do fine. Now we'll clean that up with the hand file. So I took the templates off and washed the glue with some hot water, soapy hot water. And now with the file, I'll fine tune the hole here and the USB hole. I also have some small files. There's a flat one and a round one. So here's our case after using the hand file to fine-tune the screen area and the USB port. I hand sanded it with some 150 grit and then some 400 grit, because now we're going to powder coat it. And whether you powder coat or spray paint, prep is 80% of a successful paint job. So I don't know if you can see here, it's not 100% perfect. You still see some of the belt lines on there, but it's a lot better than it was, and with the powder we won't see any of that afterwards. Here we are after the powder coat. It turned out friggin' fantastic. It's the first time I used this. It's a silver texture powder. I don't know how well you can see it, but it feels like a 150, maybe a 200 grit sandpaper. That's really nice. Next, which I really should have done before the powder coat, is we're going to eliminate some of the screw posts inside. At the very least, this one over here for the battery sled. Things are tight. The 510 connector, for there to be enough room for the 510 connector and the battery sled, the sled needs to really be down in the bottom corner there. So we'll machine this screw post away. We'll do this one too, because I make these little brackets that will then epoxy. So we'll still be able to mount our magnets, but the sled will be able to reach the bottom of the case here. I've got a 7/32 bit on here. It's a little smaller than the screw post, so it'll stay inside the hole. I'll go all the way down, and then I'll use a 1/4 inch to machine away the rest here. Now we're going to use the Dremel with this cutting bit to clean that up. While we're here, we'll bore out these holes a little bit for our magnets. This is a 1/4 inch bit, and I won't go too deep. I'll just do it enough that the magnet lays flush with the top. And the holes in the case where these are a 4mm magnet in the screw post here, they practically fit. They just need a little bit of machining. This is a 3/16 drill bit. We're gonna mix up our epoxy, and we'll epoxy in the magnets in the lid and this little bracket here that is gonna let us mount our magnets even though we machined those screw posts away. Now this bracket will, once it's in place, we'll hold it there with some alligator clips. we'll let that set, then we'll do the magnets in the case here. So we're going to put in the magnets in the case here. And we need to be mindful of the polarity. We want to make sure these attract and not repel each other. And I think I found an easy way to do that is, so the lid goes on like this. I'm using the 3mm magnets into the bracket here, so I'll place them on the lid. And I'll be sure to put them in this way so they'll all attract each other. So this one goes here. This needs to go down. Now the top ones are moving around a bit. I may have went a little big on the hole for them. So I'm going to lay a piece of tape down to try and keep those flat. Throw a bit of a weight on there. And we'll let that set. So we're done with the enclosure here. We got our magnets in. Have the bracket over here holding these magnets, seeing as how we removed the screw posts. And one thing I did off camera here, the screws that mount on the front are a flathead screw, and for them to be as flush as possible with the top of the enclosure there, I countersunk using a 9/64 bit, which is pretty much the same size as the head on these little M2 screws. Now the last bit of fabrication needed are these shelf pins that are going to act as the actuators for the onboard buttons. And we need to cut them. You need about 2 mil on the side, maybe 3 millimeter on the side that's going to go inside. Then what do we have here? 4 to 5 on the outside. What I do is I'll either use a hacksaw, I use the Dremel with the disc. I'll cut them a little bit long, and then again the file for precision fine tuning, but I'll pop them in, sandwich the board on top. I'll just hold it with my fingers there and see how much play there is between the button that one's fine. So I'll keep doing that, pull them out, fine tune with the file until I've got the height just right. On the other side, same thing, cut them long. The fine tuning here though, what I do, now it's kind of hard because there isn't a lot of material left on this side of it, but I jam it into the chuck of my drill here. It'd be hard to get it perfectly straight. And I tighten that down, and I'll go on, I'll use a piece of sandpaper, and then as it spins I'll polish the side and the front of it to get it super smooth. I'll move it around on an angle to round the front of it, and you end up with a really nice result here. So I've done that. I've got my 3 modified shelf pins here. The sled might need a little bit of adjustment as well. Let's see, minus on this side, it's going to go in like this. I had to use the file for it to fit under that bracket there. I had to remove a little bit of material here. I rounded while I was at it. The bottom corner, because it's curved in there, again, for it to really be as far down and to the left as possible, I kind of rounded a little bit there as well, so that fits super nice in there now. So the first thing I'll do is the battery sled here. We'll do the negative, and it needs a really short run. Battery negatives here. This mounts like this in the case, and the negative is going to be right here. I'll use a longer piece than we need now, but we'll trim it after. I got this really nice 16 gauge silicone wire. And for the negative, I'm going to mount it right here on the terminal. As always, tin the wires. We'll tin this as well. Get a blob of solder on there. So we got that. I'm gonna actually mount on the, see how the clip goes in and down? I'm gonna mount the wire on the back of it like this, and then we'll have plenty of room near the top to twist it and maneuver it down onto the board. I'm going to go really short on what I'm stripping here. Tin that. Tin the back of the terminal. Put this aside for now. We'll do the negative or the ground on our 510 connector. Here too, super short run. The ground ring of course is up here. The board mounts this way, and the pad, this one here, is where the ground for the, so again we'll use a longer wire than we need now, but we'll trim it real short after. Just tin them both. together. That side. Now the 510 connector. See how little space there is between the pin and the actual sled? So we can't mount our positive wire into the hole of the 510 there like we normally do. So we'll do this. I'm going to cut a notch in the pin this way, sideways. I'll use the cutting disc on the Dremel. Tiny groove in here, and I'll mount the wire sideways into that groove, and the solder will flow into the groove, into the inside, and it'll really lock it in nicely. Don't forget to remove this little gasket here before you solder. Don't want to melt that. I'm going to push the pin down. Gives me more room to make my groove here. I'll be right back with that. I'll use the clip here to try and compress the pin so I've got more room to work. We'll tin that hole. Some of the wire went into that hole, solder's in there, that should be fine. Pin still has some play. Let that cool down before I put the gasket back on there. While we wait for that, I'll mount the board again. So we'll need to measure our wire lengths. Battery minus on the bottom there, battery plus over here, ground on the bottom, and the connection to the positive 510 on top. So battery minus goes on the bottom here. I like to try and give myself a bit of slack. So if I maneuver the wire like that, even do this so we could see where the pad lines up. I'll mark them cut on the inside of that. Positive we said goes on top, and I'll give ourselves some slack. We probably want this to go under the 510 connector. Kind of like that. Inside there. And the ground, I want to run it on the bottom there. I don't want it sticking up here. Okay, take that apart again. I'm going to cut and tin all these wires here. So there is already some solder on these pads, but I'm going to add a bit more. So I think I messed up on my positive wire here. There's no way that's long enough to come reach the bottom. So I'll need to do a new wire for this one. Now to get the screen on here. There's a tiny flap on there that flips up this way. Then the screen, the ribbon goes in like this. And once you're in, you close that flap. It should click. And the screen will end up this way. Now, last time that I mounted the board, I made 2 marks on the side here where the screen, where the hole of the screen is. So I know as far as left to right goes, I want to be centered there. And I know the hole is in the center of the board, so I want to center the screen between those 2 marks and center it on the board this way. In the kit there's this little pad of double-sided tape here. So one goes on the back of the screen. The piece with the red is like an exterior double-sided tape. It's much stronger. So don't put that on the screen. We'll put that side on the board. Be careful not to apply too much pressure on the top of the screen there. You'll squish the crystals in it and damage the screen. Hold that in place for a couple seconds. try and jam this thing together. Your shelf pins in there. I'll mount the board first. Try and dress these wires a little bit. Give it a try. that works well. I might epoxy this lead down, but other than that, it's a little higher than I like it. Well, that's great. The nice silver texture, small mod, DNA75, and a Hammond 1590A.